Hey everyone, so if you're in library science, you know efficiency is everything. Before we had digital search engines, how in the world did you create a powerful, intuitive subject index without a ton of manual work? Well, the answer lies in this really elegant system called chain indexing, and today we're going to break down exactly how it works.
And look, you can't even begin to talk about chain indexing without mentioning its creator, the brilliant S.R. Ranganathan. This man was so much more than a librarian. He was a true architect of information systems. He saw this fundamental problem in how we access knowledge and engineered a solution that was, frankly, genius.
So his solution really boiled down to this one central question. How do you build a great subject index that's easy for people to use without creating a mountain of extra work? Ranganathan's answer was both simple and brilliant. You use a chain.
All right, here's our roadmap. First, we'll look at the problem Ranganathan was trying to solve. Then, we'll break down the anatomy of a chain. After that, we'll do a step-by-step walkthrough of building an index. And finally, we'll cover its legacy and then, test your knowledge.
So let's start with the why. What was the big idea behind this invention? And what specific problem was it designed to fix?
The whole point was to save time and effort. I mean, think about it. Before this, creating a subject index meant you were practically duplicating huge chunks of the classification system. Ranganathan designed a lean, super effective tool to supplement those schemes, and it was so successful that the British National Bibliography actually used it all through the 1950s and 60s.
In Ranganathan's own words, it's a more or less mechanical procedure. And that right there, that was the game changer. It took so much of the guesswork out of creating subject headings. It gave librarians a clear, logical, almost automatic method to follow.
Okay, so we keep using this word chain. What exactly is a chain in this context? Let's break down its fundamental parts, which we call links.
At its heart, a chain is just a structured way of looking at a subject. It's a sequence of ideas that goes from the very general to the very specific, and it's all derived directly from the subject's class number. You can almost think of it as the subject's DNA.
Now, not all parts of that DNA are equally useful for searching. The most important parts are what we call sought links. These are the words a real person is actually likely to use when they're looking for something. They're the main entry points for a search.
On the flip side, we have unsought links. These are parts of the hierarchy that are needed for structure, but nobody's realistically going to search for them. Like a really broad category that a user would almost always want to narrow down.
Then you've got false links. These are even simpler. They don't represent a concept at all. They're basically just the punctuation of the classification number, the dots, the zeros, the symbols that hold everything together. We just ignore these when we're making the index. And finally, the missing link. And this is where the system gets really smart, because it shows how flexible it is. If a classification system is missing a key term that would be super helpful for searchers, the indexer can just manually insert it. This makes sure the index is as useful as it can be, even if the main system has some gaps.
All right, that's the theory. Now let's get our hands dirty and see how it works in practice. We're going to take a subject and build an index from scratch, step by step.
So here's our subject, Researches on Child Psychology in India. Now, using the Dewey Decimal System, this topic gets the class number 155.4072054. This long number is going to be the foundation for our entire chain.
Okay, this is where the magic happens. We're going to deconstruct that number. We break it down piece by piece, from the broadest term, psychology, all the way down to the most specific, India. Then, for each piece, we decide what kind of link it is. Sought link for the useful stuff like child psychology and research, and unsought or false links for everything else.
And just look at what we get from that. From that one table, the process just mechanically spits out all our index entries. We get a super specific subject heading, we get a bunch of broader headings for reference, and it even creates helpful C references to guide the user. It's all derived logically right from the chain.
So we've seen how it works. It was a huge step forward for sure, but it wasn't perfect. Let's talk about its lasting impact, and where it fell a little short.
So let's weigh the pros and cons. On the plus side, it was mechanical, it was economical, and it was great at bringing related subjects together. But the criticisms were pretty significant. It was totally dependent on how good the classification scheme was, sometimes it could lose context, and, this is the big one, it was an intellectual process that just didn't translate well to computers, and that's really what led to its decline.
Okay, you've seen the theory and you've seen the practice. Now it's time to lock it all in. Let's do a quick check to see what you've learned about chain indexing.
That would be a SOT link, or SL. Remember, those are the key access points for the user.
That was the British National Bibliography, or the BNB, back in the 1950s and 60s.
Oh, that is definitely false. Its biggest weakness is that it completely relies on a well-structured classification scheme. You know the saying, garbage in, garbage out.
That's a false link, or FL. It's just the punctuation of the class number that we get to ignore.
And that wraps up our look at chain indexing. We'll leave you with this final thought. In an age of algorithms and keyword searching, what can a system based on simple structural logic still teach us about the timeless challenge of organizing information? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.